PGA Nation, we are back, and we are back with the officially unofficial fifth major championship. Very exciting week in the world of golf. I can't wait to break this one down. At least for what we've been looking for, we finally have what we will call a full field, which it feels odd now at March 12th to be saying that, like, what could be the first time all season with a really full field. So it should be a fun week. I'm excited to get into Sawgrass. Spence, how you doing tonight?
Doing well. It was a good tournament last week at the Arnold Palmer. Had Scotty Scheffler in the outright market. It's kind of like I talked about on a lot of shows. Bay Hill was one of those courses that really presented the ability for a ball striker like Scheffler to have some of that putting mitigated. And just so happens that Scheffler actually made putts with the new flat stick he had. So that's a dangerous combination for a golfer like him entering the Players' Championship this week.
I mean, yeah, listen, there's no question Scotty Scheffler is right now the best golfer in the world. He's been for a good amount of time. At this point, I think we've talked about this before on this show, but now it's like really come into fruition. It feels like there is such a change in the field of golfers, and Scotty is playing so well that they have to change the pricing, because if they kept Scotty at like 10K, he would go in at 70% owned or 65% owned. It just kind of ruins the field. So now we're getting the 5K range. We're getting this 12K-ish Scotty Scheffler, which is like makes you really have to make some tough decisions on how to do roster construction. It's really changing how we play, which is interesting, new, unique. It's a fun twist. We'll see what route people are taking on this show this week. David, how you doing tonight?
Good, mate. Good to be here. Nice to start off with a bit of Biggie Smalls. You know, if you're a true player, put your hands in the air. You know, that's how we roll. And here for the Players' Championship, obviously, and pretty excited to see this golf course. You know, it's so iconic. I mean, beyond just the par 3 17th, you've got the 16th par 4, which for me is one of the most underrated holes in golf. You can make anything from a 3 to a 7 there. Very, very volatile tournament. So super excited to see how the players all play. Obviously, a slightly weakened field compared to what we've seen in yesteryear, but the overall depth of the field is still extremely impressive, and looking forward to see who comes out on top come Sunday.
I love it. And to your point, because of the unique challenge of this golf course, unless somebody's out there with like a 5-stroke lead, which I don't envision, it's going to be an exciting finish because anything can happen on these last few holes. You know, you can go in the water on 17 and then all of a sudden the leaderboard can flip. So at the very least, it's going to be a fun watch. I mean, if you're watching this show, we have to assume you're watching the tournament. So it's going to be a fun week of golf. If you're new to the show, if you're tuning in for the first time, we are going to do a draft. We're going to draft 4 teams, and audience, you will be drafting one as well. It will be a snake-style draft, so it works like it would a typical fantasy football draft. I will break it down for you right before we get into it. But before we do so, Spence gives the best course breakdown in the industry. And Spence, I want you to tell us what you're looking for this week at Sawgrass, highlighting this is how you make a difference, right? This is how you know what type of golfer profile to target to get you an edge in what looks to be, at least from my early sight, a field where you have everyone, but there's definitely some heavy ownership leaning towards some of the favorites. And so you're going to need to find a way to find some different guys that will enable you to be different than everyone else in the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at TPC Sawgrass, there are at least a few really interesting notes about the course. So maybe if you compare this to like 10 seasons ago, like 2019, we got this massive change that occurred here. And that's why I think anybody who's running numbers that are deeper than that's probably making the mistake. This tournament moved from May to March in 2019. I've always believed in, and this is what I used to write about in my articles years ago, like that summer temperature when we got this tournament in May, that gave us this Bermuda surface that was still dormant. It was going to be playable, but dormant from the winter. It created this extremely fiery test that made stopping your irons on these smaller than average greens nearly impossible. You're still going to get a lot of that lightning quick surface that we've become accustomed to over the years, but I guess more of where I'm going with this answer is that the Bermuda grass gets overseeded on all parts of the course. That creates a much softer landing area that has, at least for the past handful of years, allowed better shot shaping and control with your irons from anywhere on the track. You're going to have difficulty. There's 17 holes with water. There's 88 bunkers that are put into place that are going to cause havoc. I noted this on a podcast earlier today. When you look at strokes gained around the green, it's still an amplified return because of these smaller putting surfaces that I mentioned. But I kind of think they're hard to weigh inside of a model just because you have these shaved runoff areas. That allows multiple options to be considered when attempting to get up and down from off the surface. I think that's one of the reasons why a golfer like Viktor Hovland has found success here. When you give somebody the ability to putt from off the surface, it kind of changes the game plan a little bit. So I added a hint of 3-putt avoidance. I mixed that in with strokes gained around the green to combine both of those factors together. Anytime you get a Pete Dye nature, you're going to get those forced layups. That's going to be critical to account for. You don't necessarily have penal rough here, but for me, this course is extremely volatile, even with all of that being said. You don't have to look any further than some of the course history returns from the past 5 years and beyond. You have a guy like Scotty Scheffler. He misses the cut. He comes 55th. He wins the tournament. Rory has a victory, a handful of missed cuts thrown into the mix here. So I think from a DFS perspective, one of the ways that I'm doing it is I'm trying to condense down my player pool a little bit so I don't have exposure to as many players this week. I want to be very concentrated in where I am going to attack. Joel, you mentioned a really good point, and it is a volatile tournament, which even makes it more heightened. We do have ownership landing in all the same spots. I don't think all chalk is bad. You're going to have to make decisions of what are the right moves and the wrong moves here, but it's a very difficult venue when we look at past history.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors. I mean, a few things we already mentioned tonight in the first few minutes of the show. There's a bunch of new factors, right? It's not the first tournament that ever they're doing this like new model of 5K golfers and 12K golfers, but it's not normal, right? I mean, they've only done it, let's say, a handful of times. To your point, there's this really odd to me for a full field condensed ownership that you got to sift through for who you're going to play. It's an extremely volatile course. And we haven't seen this many of the big names in one tournament yet this year. So there's a lot of converging things this week that I think this makes this week really exciting and a lot of fun to break down. But we got a draft ahead of us. Let us not bury the lead. We'll pull the draft board up. Audience, we're going to give you the first pick tonight. So go ahead, get started. Put your nominations in. It will take 2 before you lock it in. And like I said, it's a snake style draft. So it'll go audience, me, David, and Spence. Spence, you'll have 2, and then we'll go back. Keep in mind, you do need to stay within a DraftKings salary. So you can't just take all the best players. You do have to make sure you draft a team that you can actually play on DraftKings. Without further ado, audience, you are on the clock. And as we wait for that first pick, as the second reminder, anyone is new tonight, the way your pick gets taken is you put a nomination in. Everyone can nominate a player. Once someone gets seconded, so once a second vote comes in on that player, that becomes your pick. So there it is. It's Scotty Scheffler, obviously the first one in. I mean, there's no complaints about Scotty Scheffler, especially in what this ends up being is like a small tournament. Scotty Scheffler is safe. Hard to imagine a poor result from him. Nobody would be surprised if he wins the tournament. Nobody's going to have anything negative to say, I don't think, except maybe sometimes the putter about Scotty. But other than that, that's the best golfer in the world right now. David, let's say you want Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah, look, I mean, the selection makes sense. I find it really interesting. I'll be interested to hear from Spencer on his ownership numbers and Steve Pilati when his article drops with the best ownership numbers in the industry over at Win Daily Sports, because I have him at 33%, which I find amazing given the huge jump in price that we're seeing here. In betting markets, he's 5-1. One of the shortest that we've seen in quite some time before Tiger Woods. And that obviously comes off the back of what he did last week at the Arnold Palmer, winning by 5 strokes, and that he won here by 5 strokes the year prior. The thing for me is this is one of the most volatile golf courses that we'll see on the PGA Tour. It ranks in the top 6 for volatility over every single year since 2015. There's a lot of water in play. And although on the face of it, the winners of this golf tournament have all been pretty short odds, we're pretty close to this reading like Jim Furyk and Aban Lahiri, like some real like outsiders having won at this golf course as well. And my question, I guess, comes: you're choosing a lot of salary with Scheffler. I understand it. I'll be surprised if he finishes outside the top 10. But the question comes, on a golf course where there's such volatility, are you better taking a more balanced route, saving some of your salary cap and getting a bit different in terms of ownership as well?
And, at this point in the season, the question to me around Scheffler isn't if he's going to play well, right? I think you're almost – I'd be shocked if you didn't get a good result. It's the question of, can you build a better roster with him and 5 other guys that have to be a little bit more valued versus maybe probably getting 3 maybe like guys in the high 8, 9K range and then 3 medium tier guys. What roster do you like better? Because Scotty in the top 10 is a near lock. Like, you're going to get a top 10 at least. Is unless he wins the tournament, is Scotty in the top 10 good enough at 12.8? That's the question you got to ask. All right, I got the second pick here. And I am going to follow my same strategy from last week. I'm going to start with value. I'm going to start with the same guy. I'm going to start with the guy that has just been playing unbelievably great golf. He didn't disappoint last week. At 7,800, I think he's now playing above his price tag. The consistency has been there since all of February. So now we're looking at a month and a half, and that's Tom Hogue. The thing that gives you the most confidence with Hogue is it's all ball striking. He's a great ball striker. That's the most consistent stat that carries over. I have to imagine he's going to strike the ball very well again this week. And for our purposes, I feel like he also, while I think there's some upsides, some top 10 upside out of him at under 8K, I also think he's pretty safe from the standpoint, like, I think you're going to get, like, worst case, he falls in the 30s or something like that, where in a tournament like this, that at 7,800, that will be okay. So there are a few value guys I really like. I think Hoagie is going to carry a good amount of ownership, which I don't love. But I'll find other places to get different. I'll go to you on this one, Spence. Are you playing Hoagie at all this week?
I want to backtrack to David's comment very quickly as I move into here with Hoagie, because I think it's interesting for both of these notes, and it's a little bit different from Hoagie and Scheffler here, but because we do have so much ownership in some of these spots, from a game theory perspective, like the game theory and the contrarian route in me consistently wants to try to find a reason to fade almost everybody that is going to have popularity to them. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do with Scheffler, because I do think that it's interesting what David's talking about there. Hoagie is a little bit different. We've gotten a lot of talk recently, and I was afraid, and I'm curious to see where this number comes in. I was afraid that this was going to be 25, 30% for Hoagie, and then all of a sudden, at least according to my numbers, we've gotten a little bit of pushback lately to where some of these names that had some popularity with them seem to be dropping a little bit just because of this narrative of don't get caught playing the chalk. So if Hoagie ends up being 14.5, 15% like I currently have him, I think that's a good value play for him still. It's a nice price for the ball striking that he returns with a player who has the course record here at TPC Sawgrass. So it's going to be an ownership play almost across the board, but I don't have a problem as long as he's around that 15% mark.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the things that the exercise I'm going through more recently of how to ensure I don't go too chalky is I never want to go away. Like, if someone's super chalky, I don't necessarily mean I don't want to play them. I'm okay with playing super chalky players. You just have to look at your roster as a whole. If you are going to play a really chalky guy or two, just make sure you have a couple pretty low owned guys, a couple guys that are in the single digits. If you balance it out, I think it works fine. I think totally avoiding 1 or 2 guys that happen to be chalky is definitely not my strategy. It's just making sure if I do play them, I get different elsewhere. David, on to you. Love to get your stance on Hoagie, and you are on the clock.
Yeah, I do like Tom Hoagie here this week. Look, I think you need to bite the bullet in terms of the odds. We put him up in the 2023 Players Championship. He finished 3rd. The odds we got on him last year was 150 to 1. So obviously you're not going to find anywhere near that at the moment in terms of his pricing in betting markets. And I mean, he arguably comes in here with much better form. When we put him up last year, before he finished third, he'd missed the cut at the Arnold Palmer the week before. Obviously, last week he finished 12th and was within our betting picks, and he just striped the field and approach. So really like him here this week. I was surprised with the ownership at 13%. Yes, he's the highest owned of the 7K range, but 13% seems a little bit too low for where he's priced, the incoming form, the past history here, and also at Wentworth, which if you're looking over on the DP World Tour is a really good guide for what you can expect this week. There's lots of correlation. Guys like Aaron Rye, Shane Lowry, Victor Hovland's finished 5th there last 2 attempts and has a good record at TPC Sawgrass as well. Lowry, if I didn't mention him already, and Christian Bezadenhout as well links those 2 courses. And he finished 14th at Wentworth in his very first look on that course. So he ticks that box too for me. So really like the play there. I'm also going to go a bit of value, a little bit higher than Hoagie, but I'm going to take Hideki Matsuyama at 9,800. Again, I was surprised with his ownership here. I'm getting like just over 13%. I know he's a perennial favorite of Joel, but he hasn't drafted him this week, so he's definitely going to play the entire tournament, not going to withdraw. So he hasn't got the curse of Joel hanging over him. But look, Hideki's been in awesome form, right? He won at the Genesis in another really strong field. Finished 12th last week at the Arnold Palmer. I was quite worried with him at the Arnold Palmer entering the final round because I felt that if he won or finished top 5, he would just be absolutely cut in odd markets and priced up way too high in DFS to justify playing him. But fortunately, his final round, he found the water twice and finished 12th in the end, which actually I think is a benefit coming in here because this is a course that really suits him. He's finished 7th, 8th, 5th here previously. He's got a 3rd at Sedgefield. That's like one of the most correlated courses we'll see all season in terms of comp courses. Webb Simpson's won at both. He loves the Wyndham so much he named his daughter Wyndham. Siwoo Kim's won at both. So you've got good links there. Henrik Stenson was won at both as well. And Hideki's obviously got the 3rd at that course too. So hidden as well is in 2020, the tournament that wasn't. He broke the then course record here, shot 9 under in the first round before the tournament got called because of COVID. So that's a little bit hidden as well. And unless you're diving into some of the data, you might miss the fact that Matsuyama absolutely loves this course. So 9,800, very happy to take him.
I think you hit it spot on. Take a guy who likes the course, married with a guy who's playing really good and is in good form. That's something to like. And you know what's interesting? I think rightfully so. It wasn't too long ago where Matsuyama was, and it may have been even less than a month ago, Matsuyama was down into the 7K range. And we were all like, this is criminal. Like, why is he Bristol? And like, he wasn't even chalky at 7K. It was just like normal. And now a couple weeks later, he's almost at to the 10K range. And a couple good weeks of golf and then put him on a golf course that he likes, what that can do for you. So rightfully so, I like Hideki this week. Spence, would love your take on Hideki, and you got 2.
I think when we look at Hideki, I mean, I agree with David with the answer of the ownership was probably a little surprising. It's probably because he's priced up, though. Like, there's a lot of names in that. We'll call it Victor Hovland at 10-1 all the way down to, I don't know, Shane Lowry at 9-1. Like, there's a lot of ownership that's going to be eaten up in that spot. I haven't necessarily narrowed down that player pool of who's in and who's out yet. There are 3 guys that I do like more than Hideki. So we'll see where Hideki ends up fitting into the mix for me. But I don't have anything bad to say. And I mean, as the chat has talked about, during that COVID year, Devin is right. I mean, this was all Hideki in that first round until the tournament got canceled. And that was a very unfortunate outcome as somebody who had Hideki as my one and done pick that year. So, I think Hideki has shown high upside at this venue in the past. But I will move us forward into my picks. And I've talked a lot about ownership, and I'm going to go with 2 very popular plays here in the $8,000 range, which is going to make me have to get different at some point. But I'm going to start with Russell Henley at 8,600. I know the one argument for him would be that a lot has been done with the putter right now. I understand that this isn't necessarily your prototypical Bermuda course. This overseeded texture makes a little bit of a subtle change to it. But when you look at Russell Henley, and somebody made this joke on Twitter, I saw this last week at the Arnold Palmer, that he made a handful of putts. The announcer said that he's a great putter. And we all know who do this every single week that he's not a great putter. I do want to say, though, that when you have historically thrown him on similar green complexes, that put together this soft green but really quick surface still to the mix. Henley has been or is the biggest climber in my model, jumping all the way inside the top 10 in expectation, while he's outside of the top 80 the other way. So while there's some popularity around him, I was also surprised to only see about 14%. I thought this number was going to be vastly higher. Like if you look at any of the betting markets and any of the head-to-head markets out there, he's a favorite against every single person in this $8,000 range. My model would agree with that answer of him being the best play in the 8,000. So I'll go with him for my first pick. And then I am going to circle back down beneath to a player I play quite a bit in Siwoo Kim at 8,000. This is a past champion of this tournament. If you look at what he did last week at the Arnold Palmer, he gained 9.1 strokes tee to green. He lost over 8 strokes with his putter. That is not necessarily some abnormal performance from him at Bay Hill. We've seen that in the past of him losing 5, 6, 7 strokes during that event. For whatever reason, that surface just is not conducive to his eye. When you put him on this venue, when he won the tournament, he gained a little bit over a stroke. I think if he puts together one of those neutral performances, this can be one of those Scotty Scheffler-esque sort of outlooks to where maybe he's not Scotty Scheffler in the ball striking, but he can be one of those pristine ball strikers that if the putter can just be neutral, all of a sudden we're talking about a top 10 from him. So I do think he's value here at 8,000.
Oh, I love it. I'm noticing an interesting trend. I've heard us mention course history and guys who historically played well here more often than I thought, which is interesting to me. I do value that. I thought that would be something that maybe wouldn't have been as valued this week because of the volatility. But I do endorse both plays. David, you got one. Would love your take on both Siwoo and Henley, and then who you looking to match with Hideki.
Yeah, I mean, to back up the point, what you said around a course history, like it isn't that correlated actually to future success at this course. One of the least correlated actually on the PGA Tour compared to other venues because of the volatility, which you absolutely spot on to point out there. Russell Henley, I was extremely close to including on my card this week at 55-1 on Open. He's been backed into 40s in most places. I think that 55-1 was really good value. I just couldn't swallow the drop compared to what we had last year. I actually put him up here again at 150-1 on this golf course back in 2023. He finished 19th. And then obviously he's a third of that price now. And the question comes for me with Henley is like, he's been striking the ball so well. Like he's playing as a top 20 golfer in the world at the moment, but he should have won. Like he should have won by this point. And the same, we were on him at the Sony Open. He should have closed out that tournament. Last 6 holes, he played at 1 over and he finished 4th when he really should have gone out and finished the victory. And he has all the correlation in the world at Sedgefield. He's finished 9th, 7th, 5th, 2nd in his last 4 starts there. Extremely correlated to what we'd expect of the players. So I get the pick. My question comes, does he close it out? And does in Spencer's construction, I'll be interested to see how the rest of his line goes because I'm not sure if the win equity is there compared to others that he might end up taking. Siwoo's probably a pass for me with the putter. The putter still remains concerned for me. It depends which one he uses, whether he goes the broomstick or the traditional shorter handle putter, because one of them he's very good with and the other he sucks with. And I don't know why he keeps sticking with it. He just likes to chop and change between the two. And that remains the real big question for him. I was going to take a very low golfer, but I'm going to hope that he comes back to me and take someone that I think might not make it back, which is Brian Harman at 7,900. I think he is going to be a popular play, although I'm surprised that his ownership's only hovering around 10%. I thought that he would be much, much higher than that. Last week at the Arnold Palmer, he was third in the field for approach on a golf course that's really actually too long for him. It's not typically his strength to be striking on approach at that kind of golf course. He was third in the field, which was amazing, and lost strokes putting. And we all know how good a putter Brian Harman is typically as well. So that was a little abnormal and kind of put him on the radar. Good correlation here to Harbour Town, another Pete Dye design, host of the Arbacy Heritage. He finished 7th there. He was third here in 2021, and good correlation at the Wyndham Championship as well. So there's lots to like, I think, about Brian Harman this week, and he seems a bit undervalued at the current price tag.
I agree. I think Brian Harman tends to play up in the bigger tournaments and play a little bit better. I think this spot under 8K, that if he's in the mix with the big boys, that he can stay and compete there because we've seen him do it. I think it's a good value play, especially when you're looking for ways this week which can be more challenging to get different, because I don't think he's going to carry an overly high ownership tag. Spence, what say you on Harmon?
I made this argument on a show earlier this week. So Bay Hill was 100%. Of course, that was too long for him. There was a reason why my model had him as one of the best fade candidates on the board. It did not work out correctly. Thankfully, there wasn't a matchup that entered the space that I actually found value on to oppose him with, but that doesn't take away from the fact that my model thought he was mispriced in a bad way last week. So when he goes out there, he gives you a 12th place finish. He gains 5.6 strokes with his irons. And now all of a sudden you throw him at a venue here where he does have 2 top 10 finishes. My model has so many upside traits that it likes about him. There are certain ways that I can run my model that it believes he's a 40-1 golfer. He was one of the first tickets I punched when he opened at 70-1. I think he's a really savvy play at the ownership that we're seeing right now. I also think that there's a legitimate case to be made that because he's a major championship winner and maybe it's just been a little too much out of sight, out of mind recently with it up until last week. I think he should have been closer to the $9,000 range if we're being honest here. So, whether you want to say that he's a couple $100 overpriced or $1,000 or underpriced here, like this is a situation with Harmon where there's real value to be found in the betting market and here on DraftKings.
There you have it. I love it. I love it. All right. I am stuck here between two guys I'm thinking about. I'm going to go with my gut and my instinct, which is going to be Doug Gim. And, listen, I get it. Chalkity, chalk to chalk to chalk. I own that. Yeah, it's chalky. I get it. I'm going back to the well. But here, the thing is, and that's the beauty of the Draftcast, Scheffler's gone. Matsuyama's gone. We'll see what comes back to me when I get to my higher price guys. But I think I'm going to get different with paying up, and I'll just have the chalky value, which I think that can work. And, Gim since late January his worst result is a top 20. He's in the top 20 every tournament he's played in. So to get a guy under 7K that's been nothing but top 20s in the last 2 months since January, I like where that puts him here. I think he's playing well enough to compete this week, even in a more loaded field, especially where he found a hot putter last week. If he carries any of that hot putter over to this week, I think even a higher upside top 10 might be in play. So I'm okay with taking the chalk here, going with the 6,800 Gim, and I'll find ways to get different elsewhere. Audience, you're on the clock. It looks like at least one pick is already in. Great job. We'll wait for that second one to get double, which it may have been. Yeah, the second one is double. The audience did a great job. Before we go into the audience picks, we'll start with you, David. Are you on Gim at all this week?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're absolutely right. He's banging form, right? 4 consecutive finishes of 16th or better. Although somewhat debatable the quality of those fields, right? And has had a 6 here in 2022. My question with Gim comes, right, like we see a real disproportionate number of shots under 150 yards at this golf course. Typically, that's not the strongest of his approach ranges. The sixth place finish in 2022 might disregard that a little bit, but that would be my big question mark of, yes, he's in form, but does the approach metrics really suit the game that he has? And also, credit to the audience. I mentioned that a golfer I was hoping would come back to me. That was Billy Ho. So, unfortunately, they've stolen that one from me.
Oh, you know what I love about the audience here? The continuity. They were locked in on value. They said after they took Scheffler, we got to get value. They came in, got their picks in quick, and got them doubled quick. Like the audience is in sync tonight, which is scary because there's a big crew tuned in. And if you guys are all on the same page, look out. Could be a good week. It's a good start to your team. Spence, I want to go to you here. I loved your take on the 3 last picks between Gim, Rye, and Billy Ho.
I was kind of surprised to see that Gim's ownership was taking a very similar trajectory to some of these other players like Tom Hoagie, where it was a little bit lower than I was anticipating it being. I agree with David that some of the proximity numbers are a little bit worse for him than some of his baseline totals elsewhere, but my model loved Gim. I'm probably out on Billy Horschel, but for me, Aaron Rye was the player that I was hoping was going to fall back to me. And I know that would be a very popular start for me to go Henley, Siwoo, Kim, and Rye. I still had a way to get different with it, but there's a lot to like about Rye. When I was running some of the projections and I was trying to extrapolate it out from past performances, he was consistently one of the biggest underachievers in my model at this course. I mean, he came in 19th that year, but even my model thought he should have been better than that finish when he presented that result. So I think there's a real reason to why the form is in place. We have a price tag that is too cheap, and the market is moving in the favor of, like, he is a favorite against Doug Gim, who's everybody's favorite person this week down in the $6,000 range. So I think for Rye to be a favorite over him, that means something to me. Like, you can be a favorite over somebody that I want to fade, and it means a lot less. It means a lot more when it's a guy like Gim that the public likes him. A bunch of sharp money likes Gim. So like that is a very telling sign of where the sharp money is entering the space here on Rye.
There you have it. Love that intel. And just like that, I am back on the clock. And I am, I'm ashamed of myself for the amount of chalk that I'm taking on, but I guess this number isn't as high as I originally thought it was. I'm going to go with Willie Z here. I'm going back to Will Zalatoris. I think I'm pretty confident he's turned that corner. I mean, he looks to be like his old self. He's playing well. He's striking the ball well. And he's even making a few putts. And if we can get any consistency out of that putter with the ball striking it from Willie Z, there's a ton of upside. Let's not forget, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 seasons ago, Willie Z was a top 5 priced golfer in every tournament he played in, right? And he's creeping up to that. He's not quite there right now, but he's pretty darn close. I think we're just going to see the trajectory go up and up. I think this is going to be the bounce back year for Willie Z. So at 9.9, I'm happy. I think it's almost a value under 10K. We'll go to you, Spence, first. Any interest in Will Zalatoris this week?
My only concern with Zalatoris that always comes into play is this short game of his. 131st in my model in 3-putt avoidance, if I believe that there's an ability to putt from off the surface. He is the number 5 overall scrambler of the golf ball, though, in 2024, number 1 overall. So that's kind of like the contrary take, I guess, to based off of that answer there. The weighted scoring has him inside the top 10. I have him 9th overall in my model right now. He is the 4, 5, 6, 7th price player. I think he's priced correctly at the end of the day. I don't have a massive take one way or another with it. I think for GPPs, with the ownership that we're seeing, I probably lean towards being out for that reason, but I think he's in the ballpark of where he should be.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that makes sense. David, would love your take on Willie Z this week, and you're on the clock with your 3rd pick.
Yeah, look, I don't mind Willie Z this week. Obviously, the recent form has been really, really good. I'm not ashamed to say we got him at an extremely good number in our Masters future, which you're never going to find again, which is one of the reasons to be logged into to win daily. So make sure you take advantage of the best deal ever, which is in the description at the moment. We've brought it back exclusively for the players and Masters lead-in. So look, he was great value for the Masters when we put him up. That's obviously been cut down, and it does look like he's in great form, and the putter looks good, although there were moments with the Arnold Palmer, there was a couple of 5-footers there, which, his past practice stroke looks so good. And then he steps up and then looks like he develops Parkinson's like halfway through his backswing on a couple of those shorter putts there. And that would worry me a little bit if that started regressing. My comment around him would be, I don't know if his form here and his correlated form at other courses, even when he has been healthy, has been that good. So I'm a bit surprised with the number. And personally, out of that kind of range, I'm going to be going Matsuyama a lot more than Willie Z and saving on the ownership myself. So once again, congrats to the audience for ruining my draft and stealing Billy Ho off me there. I'll have more on my article in Win Daily Sports over there on Billy Ho and exactly why I think this is a great tournament for him at pretty long odds. So I'm going to go back to the 8,100, try and steal someone from Spencer, and I'm going to take Benny Arn at 8,100 there. He's just been in great form as of late. Obviously, 3 tournaments in a row. He's finished 21st or better, 8th last week at the Arnold Palmer. Very good correlated courses, right? Like Sedgefield, he's finished 2nd and 3rd. We've talked about how correlated that is. And then in terms of Wentworth, obviously, that's one of the most correlated on the DP World Tour. He was a winner there back in 2015, so great correlation as well. And for me, he's a much better golfer than he has been previously. Obviously, went back to the Corn Ferry. He's arrived back on the PGA Tour just in awesome form. Data Golf for having ranked as the 20th best golfer in the world right now. And I think he's great value at 8,100. And he's not really attracting any ownership as well, which I also like.
Boom. And that's big. I think all those factors, like, those are the type of upside guys that work in this tournament where you're in a low ownership because of the range he's in more than the talent of the golfer. And I think Benny Ann's a guy who we've seen spike this year. There's certainly a lot of upside. I endorse that pick. Spence, you got 2. Would love your take on Benny Ann and who you pairing with Henley and Siwoo.
There were essentially, Finau was very close in the $8,000 range, but there were essentially 3 players in the $8,000 section that my model thought had value compared to their price tag. I grabbed 2 of them with my first 2 picks. The third one would be Ben on there. So I think at 8,100, he's certainly worth considering there. I am conflicted on how to round out this build right now. There's a lot of different ways to go. I will go with the players. So to start this and then move across from there. But there has been a stat, and it's a combination of a stat for me. It takes proximity from 0 to 150 yards and scrambling, and it merges it into one answer there. And that has been a highly indicative corollary trend of winners, or at least high-end results. So, these names I'm going to say, there's reasons why they won this golf tournament. They were some of the best players or the best player at the time. But Scottie Scheffler ranked number 1 in that area last year when he won it. Justin Thomas was number 1 in that area when he won it in 2021. This season, the number 1 player for me in that metric, Max Homa. I think Max Homa right now, the current form is trending in the right direction. The course history here is, at least of the last 2 years, about as good as you're going to find. So I will take him at 9,600. The second pick here is where I struggle of where I want to go, because it really locks me into a decision of one way or another with it. I think I'm going to go with Adam Hadwin at 7,500. There's been probably for the past, I would say, month or so, Hadwin's been a name that's consistently been popping in my model. At the 52nd last week was undone. The 4th at the Genesis was the good output of it. You've kind of gotten these hit and miss results with him where he's randomly inside the top 15. He's randomly missing these cuts, but David makes a point where there is really no correlation between past success at TPC Sawgrass and what we've seen. But I do want to make the argument that at least in the last 5 years of this, there's something that we can point towards with this change. And Hadwin's made 4 or 5 cuts. I thought at 7,500, there was maybe a little bit more safety that met the eye than what you're going to get at the price tag there. And some of the upside numbers in my model really liked him. He was one of the biggest climbers that I had when looking for that upside trajectory. I bet him to come top 20 at 3-1 for that reason. There's going to be downsides with any of these answers for the obvious reasons when you kind of get here, but 20th for me in that category. I talked about a scrambling plus 0 to 150 yard proximity inside the top 25 for bogey avoidance, the weighted 3-putt percentage he put together, and weighted scoring. To me, he's the consolation prize that I'm trying to get if I miss out on Brian Harmon and Tom Hoagie, where I think there's still some upside to be found with him. There's another name too that we can get to later in the show, but I'll go with Adam Hadwin for the sake of this.
There you have it. And to your point, there's something he likes here. I mean, if you just look at his last few at this course, he's had some good results. So he likes something here at under 8K. I think you will find some upside. I like the Hadwin play more than Homa. I have concerns with Homa. We've seen Homa peak with his ball striking in the past, and that's just not the case now. I do think Homa is an upper echelon golfer. I certainly can see a world where he gets that back. But I just have concerns with the current state of his game. David, what say you on Homa and Hadwin? And you are up with your fourth pick.
Yeah, look, I like both of the plays. I think that Max Homer, I take your point on the approach, but typically his best work actually comes under 150 yards, which is what we're going to find a lot of this week. And the 9th and 13th place finishes, his last two outings here, kind of makes sense. I think it looks like he's starting to peak at the right time. He did a lot of work with the putter last week, with my only misgiving. Whether that perhaps sees a bit of regression this week would be my only question mark. And Adam Hadwin looks pretty solid as well. 10th at the Wyndham Championship over at Sedgefield in 2021. Finished 9th and 13th here the last 2 years as well. So good correlation in terms of the courses. Lost with the putter last week, which is typically a real strength of his as well. So compared to Homer, you'd almost expect the opposite and hopefully some regression in his putting stats for Hadwin there. So I'm going to actually stick at that same price range. 8,100. I have a lot of misgivings about this pick, so bear with me, because I do think that there comes some risk with this. We're taking a bit of a punt when we say Tom Kim has got a great chance this week. It's a golf course that on paper should suit him perfectly. The issue is that in 2024, his putters have really fallen off the map, and that's typically such a strong suit of his game. In saying that, the last four, he's been basically at field average or above in a row. So hopefully his putter's kind of starting to turn the corner. Obviously, I've spoken pretty extensively about the huge correlation between Sedgefield and TPC Sawgrass. We all know what Tom Kim did at the Wyndham Championship. He opened with a quadruple bogey and then went on and won the tournament by quite some margin on that golf course there, right? So very good correlation to here. And I think I'm just starting to see enough trends in his game to suggest that he's probably value at the 8,100. The reason why we're getting that price is because the form hasn't been great and the putter looks like starting to turn a corner. So happy to take a little chance on him there.
It makes sense. I'm a little scared off by Tom Kim as well, but I think all the points you made are good. I think one thing that plays into his favor this week is it's a little different type of course in terms of proximities that you're looking for. And he's been playing tournaments recently that were longer, probably wouldn't have been most suited for him. And this is a little bit different. I think this is a little bit more suited for his game. I think this gives him an opportunity to get back to that spot where he was kind of gaining like 4 or 5 strokes a tournament, because it's those proximities that will suit him better. So I definitely can see there being some upside there. Spence, what say you on Tom Kim?
I have some trepidation, kind of for the same reasons as you, Joel. I do think, though, that when we look at Tom Kim and we discuss the profile, there was a time where you and I, probably specifically more than most of the rest of the market, before we got this increased price that he was in the 10,000s every single week, we were kind of saying over and over again, this is an elite golfer, this is an elite golfer. And he proved to be an elite golfer. Now, over the past handful of months, the results have kind of gone south. It's kind of plateaued a little bit. At some point, he becomes a value if we're just looking for pure upside. So there are a lot worse dart throws that you can do than Tom Kim, because at the base surface level of this, you would think the Players is a really nice course fit for the way that his game would morph into this venue.
Yeah, I agree. So I think it could be sneaky from that standpoint as well. All right, I'm pleased with the way this draft has broken for me, where I'm going to be able to land the guy I wanted to here, and that is Ludwig. Listen, now I had some chalk to start. I got to get different. For this range, I think he's not going to be unowned, but he's not going to be one of the higher owned guys in this range, which helps my lineup here. I think people are going to look at the Arnold Palmer and see that he lost 4 strokes on approach and be a little bit scared off. I'm okay with overlooking that. I think what I really love about Ludwig is he's very consistent with the driver, and he's long but not wild. He's very consistent, which is going to be very big here. I think, too, he's very consistent with the putter. He's been gaining strokes putting consistently now for the entire year. I think he only lost strokes putting 1 tournament, and that was in early January. After that, he's been gaining strokes putting every tournament. And the reality is he's gained strokes on approach every week, but at the API. So I think he had a bad week. I think he gets back to what we've seen from him. I think he's going to find his stroke again here. gain strokes there, and if he gains strokes putting and off the tee as well, I think you get another top 10 result, if not top 20 at 9,300. It's a really good value in this field. It enables me to kind of build out a more balanced approach to the rest of my lineup. So I really like Ludwig this week, total package, including ownership and everything like that. We'll go back to you, Spence, here. Are you playing Ludwig at all this week?
Yeah, and I think he's a really nice fit to your build when you look at ownership. This is one of the ways where you can get different. You've taken 3 popular choices. All of a sudden, you take a person like Oberg here that I see at about 10%. I think we might have classified Oberg's game of where he found his best success way too early because of the distance that he has off the tee. My model continues to find his best upside actually occurs at some of these club down spots. He's the number 1 expected total driver for me at this course. To me, this feels like a nice buyback opportunity where people aren't going to want to play him. And I think there's a lot of upside to be found here. I don't expect a lot of people to like the play, Joel. Pretty much any time that I mentioned him in my article yesterday, there was some pushback. I was talking to Nick earlier today, and I know Nick was hit and miss on what he thought of Oberg also with it, but I think there's something to this from a game theory perspective.
And that's the beauty of this game that we play, right? There is something beautiful about being right and going against the grain, because it's easy to go with the grain and go with the ownership, but you want to go against the grain. You want to get the lower ownership. And when you're right about that, that should pay a dividend. So if you're going to be really good at this, you're going to have to make picks and what not everyone agrees with, and just have to be right about it. Audience, you're on the clock. We need 2. It looks like 1's in. We're going to get 1 more. Before we finalize those picks, we'll go to David. David, what is your take on Ludwig this week?
Yeah, look, I think he's a really interesting spot, right? Because on the face of it, this golf course is going to take the driver out of your hand a lot, right? And that would be Ludwig's strongest suit. On paper, you think, great, long straight driver, he's going to want like a course like Torrey Pines. But then to Spencer's point, he won at the RSM Classic, this like tight fiddly course. He won on the European Tour at Crans-sur-Sierre, the Omega European Masters. Again, a course we driving rates really highly, and it's these like pinpoint greens. He finished 10th at Wentworth in his 1 try, and then 14th at Sedgefield as well. So again, those are really good guides to what you can expect from TPC Sawgrass. And I think from like a pure ownership play, he's really interesting in large GPPs, as you said. Like he's for me the 3rd lowest owned in that range. Wyndham Clark and Cameron Young would be the only 2 within the 9K range that I have less than Ludwig in terms of ownership. So really interesting in terms of that statistics. Again, I do worry a bit about taking the driver out, but in saying that, since this tournament moved from May to March, it's tended to play a little bit longer, and there's been a lot of rain in Florida as well. So maybe the golf course actually ends up playing a bit longer and he gets to use his driver a bit more often.
There you have it. All right. Audience, great job with your first pick. Is in a favorite of the show this week, Pavone. It's another value play, another way for you guys to make Shuffler work. We've seen he has plenty of upside. I like the pick at 6,700. Audience, we are going to need a second while we wait. Oh, is it locked? I see the lock button, but I only see 1 nomination. It might be Finau. I'll give it a minute to double check, but we'll take first. David, will you be playing Pavone at all this week?
I won't be playing Pavone this week, and the reason why is, when we put him up early this year at 125-1 when he won at the Farmers, obviously that was a great victory for him. He looks to be in really good form. The issue for me comes that he's done all of his work on these really long golf courses, right? Like that seems to be where he's found his game, not just on the PGA Tour, but the DP World Tour, which is one of the reasons why we included him at the Farmers, was his performance on those longer golf courses. And my concern with him comes that on these shorter courses, whether it really suits his game and what we expect him to perform at. So I think for me, the fact that he's going to be fairly decently owned in the 6K range, and I don't know if it's a best spot for him, he's probably in a void until he's given TPC Sawgrass a couple of goes and gotten used to the course.
Fair enough. Audience, second pick is in. We are going to lock in Tony Finau. I think the pricing is interesting. I think Tony scares me a bit this week. I don't think I'm going to be playing him, but I'd love to get your take, Spence. Will you be playing Finau?
It's the same question that we ask about Scheffler and I asked about Siwoo Kim. Can they make enough putts to work themselves up the leaderboard? We have not seen that from Finau this year. Don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I couldn't even give you an answer to it. Whether him not playing last week is actually good that he gets to come here, not having to take on Bay Hill, or if that's a negative that he didn't have to see a course like that. But the weighted proximity numbers are going to love him. The par 5 scoring that he's put together this year also, he's the number 1 par 5 scorer on the PGA Tour this season. Number 1 in the weighted par 5 expected par 5 birdie or better percentage at TPC Sawgrass. So there's a lot of pieces to hold on to that if you are trying to find a reason for upside. At 8,500, you kind of get that already built in at a cheaper price tag than what this would have been a year ago, where I'm sure he would have been in the $9,000 range. So I am generally okay considering Finau, but you just have to know what you're signing up for with him. Don't think there's going to be a lot of ownership, which is a great thing, but that short game right now is disastrous. I don't know if there's another way to put it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, I'm gonna hit the entire draft with some honesty here. I'm very torn between two players, and I'm going to tell you who they are because I can't take both of them. So it's Justin Thomas and Wyndham Clark. Justin Thomas, they've priced him up. He's playing great. He's very chalky. And at this price and the ownership, I think there's some value to pivoting to Wyndham Clark. There's also another value play that I have in mind with my last pick that Wyndham Clark affords me to take, which I couldn't take with Justin Thomas. So I am going to stick with Wyndham Clark here. It helps this, what started off as being a relatively chalky lineup. I am now starting to average out with two lower owned plays with Clark and Aberg. One of the biggest factors behind my Wyndham Clark pick as well is one, he played great last week, obviously, but he tends to play up in big spots, right? And there's been that rumor of like the big game Wyndham, and this is it. This is a big spot. This is where you can prove yourself. So I think this is one of those spots where we get the best out of Wyndham. And if I can get the best out of Wyndham at a lower ownership here, it makes perfect sense for this lineup. So I'm going to stick. I like the Wyndham pick, but it was a close call between him and Thomas for me here. I'll go to you first, Spence. Any interest in Clark this week?
I think if I'm directly comparing Thomas and Clark, $900 difference, about a 7 or 8% difference right now in ownership, with Thomas being over 16%, Clark being more in that 8 to 9% range. I probably agree that I would rather play Clark. I have some of my hesitations this week about Thomas. I'm not necessarily as high on him as the rest of the market seems to be. Wyndham has a couple portions of his game that probably see a negative downturn specifically for this venue, but inside of the top 15 for me overall rank, inside of the top 12 for upside, those are quite substantial better returns than I had for upside than what I got from Thomas. And I know that's a contrarian take this week for as popular as Thomas is going to be, but Clark has been a player for me that it seems like we talked about it a lot last year between all of us, that Clark's game was trending in the right direction, and it just took some time for the rest of the community to figure it out. We now have the price tag where it's showing that he's that player, but the ownership doesn't necessarily ever want to follow, which is what the intriguing answer is when you can give me a sub 10% golfer that has possess upside over and over again.
There you have it. David, you're on the clock. I love your take on Wyndham Clark this week, and then you got one more.
Yeah, Wyndham Clark's an interesting one, right? Because he has shown up in a big way at these big events, as you kind of alluded to. I mean, since May last year, he's won the Wells Fargo, he's won the US Open, he won in a elevated event at Pebble Beach, which was, in fact, like on paper, not really the best course fit for him. Third at the Tour Championship as well. Don't forget about that one. So at these big events, like, he has just proven that he shows up time and time again. My misgiving is I don't know if it is the best course fit for him. As I said, I wouldn't have thought Pebble Beach was the best course fit for him. And he seemed to do pretty well there. And the driving actually is really, I guess, where the issue comes with that. In saying that, some of these longer drivers can club down, they can perform at some of these shorter courses, and maybe he's got the mettle now to kind of take that more mature approach and leave the driver in the bag and take a 2-iron, for example, off the tee, like something like Ryan Fox does, which sees him find success on some of these more fiddly courses. He hasn't done so yet. He hasn't performed really well at any of the comp courses or here, so that would be the question mark. But I think the ownership particularly is intriguing given his performance of late.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. All right, you got about 8K left for 2 picks. Who are you going with first?
Yes, I'm going to go and cut down some salary savings. I would have loved to have rounded out this lineup with something like Billy Ho, Jordan Spieth kind of finish. Would have been really nice. Obviously, Billy Ho's off the table, so I can't do that. Brendan Todd, I think, within that range is really interesting as well. If you are finding yourself in the 6,500, he looks very, very good value. But I'm going to take 6,900 Nick Taylor. I think that this guy just actually possesses a lot more win equity than we give him credit for. We've seen him in contention twice over this past year or so. He won the Canadian Open when he was in another big-time event at the Phoenix Open, winning that as well in a decent field. Last week at the Arnold Palmer finished 12th, kind of same answer to Brian Harman, right? Like that is not the course that Nick Taylor should be performing at. It's too long for him. He's not going to excel with his approach over 200 yards, which really is what Bay Hill demands. And he's much, much stronger with his wedges, but he still meant to finish 12th last year, gaining strokes on approach. And that kind of, I guess, is the recipe that I want to follow this week. If we find him on his course here, that suits him a lot better. He's finished 16th here back in 2019. He's at his Sedgefield, which is really correlated. He's got an 8th and a 10th as well. Harbour Town, he's got good success as well previously too. So, look, I really like the course fit with him in terms of driving accuracy, the wedge play they're going to see from him. And as I said, we've seen recently that once he's in contention, he can kind of find success. He just seems way too low priced for someone who won just 3 starts ago in a really big-time event.
I like it. I like the play. And I agree with you. I look at Nick Taylor as a high upside. I think he's pretty volatile. You can get a miscut, but I think if he's in it, he certainly has top 10 upside, even in a field like this. So that's the type of guy I look for, profile for a GPP for me. Spence, you got 2 here to round out your squad. Would love your feelings on Nick Taylor this week and who you're looking at to finish out this draft.
Before I even give the picks, I love the shout out of Jordan Spieth. I don't think I'm going to round out this build with him, but that has been a way that I've been trying to figure out how to fit Spieth into this build this entire time. And maybe from a construction standpoint, it would make a lot more sense for me to go in that direction. I thought when Spieth opened in the outright market at 40-1, I thought it drifted a little bit too far. There's a very volatile profile to him. He was one of the big climbers in my model, though, when I looked at expected total driving for similar courses. He also got an increase in weighted proximity. So I think Spieth is an intriguing name in that $9,000 section that people aren't going to want to go to. I think when you get down into the 6s here, Nick Taylor was an option that I was considering. I was probably going to round this out with some combination of Sam Burns and Nick Taylor or Jordan Spieth or whichever way I'm going to go with it. I think the safest route to make this build right now, I also considered Beau Hossler. I just hate the course history that he has. I know he's a different player this year, but I think there's a little bit more safety to Brendan Todd. So I'm going to take Brendan Todd at 6,500. I'm going to take Sam Burns at 9,200. Burns was another one of those players like Homa for me, where there was this massive increase from when I combined those 2 stats together. There was 2 players that ranked in the top 5 from 0 to 150 yards in the scrambling. Homa was obviously one of them. Burns was the other there. So I think Burns might have a little bit more upside than people believe. And really from a betting answer here, he imploded at Bay Hill on Sunday. He shot a 78. I am curious what that number would have opened at if he did not implode and we got another one of those top 10 finishes from him. So I thought 40-1 was an intriguing value when that price opened up. It was one of the first tickets that I bet this week. But that leaves me a lot of money on the table too. So if there's a little bit too much ownership that I have in some spots, and I do think I have some difference makers that are a little bit unique, $600 is still a lot of money to leave on the table. So I feel fine by making my lineup different that way.
I think you made a really good point on Sam Burns. I think Sam Burns is getting a little bit overlooked this week because of one blow-up day, one bad day. I'm like, one bad day on a pretty tough golf course, shouldn't change your outlook on somebody too much. So I really like that play. I like the look of your squad here. David, we'll go to you. You got one pick left, 9,200 to spend. Would love your take on Burns and Todd this week and hear how you're going to finish out this squad.
Yeah, look, Brendan Todd, as I mentioned, was very, very close to making my team this week in terms of the way that this draft has gone. Probably would have liked that Billy Ho route if I could have, but audience, shout out to you for stealing them from me. Obviously been paying attention in the Win Daily Discord as of late. But look, I think Brendan Todd is just perennially underrated. Again, last week, 6 at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. It's not a golf course he should be playing well at. It's far too long for him. He prefers these driving accuracy courses where he can lean into his short game and just keep it in the fairway and keep it in play. Same again with his wedge play is just excellent, and it seems a really good correlation with 7th and 10th recently at Sedgefield. He's also had a 4th previously at RBC Heritage, another Pete Dye course as well. So I like that one there. Sam Burns, I was really worried when Spence said Brendan Todd because I thought that he might take this next player that I'm going to take, which is Shane Lowry at 9,100, who you're getting an ownership discount compared to Sam Burns there. Really good course history. He's played here and finished 8th. He's finished 13th, and he's finished, I believe, a 16th back in 2016 as well. So really good course history. And in terms of our correlated courses at Wentworth, he's got an amazing history there. He's won. He's had a 3rd, 11th, 17th, 18th, 6th. Twice he's had 6th there. So really good correlation to that comp course as well. And then obviously the history here as well is really, really promising. And he's coming in off a 4th at the Cognizant Classic and then a 3rd at the Arnold Palmer. So he's banging form, really good course comps, and he's underpriced and less owned than someone like Sam Burns. So I think he's a great go at 9,100 and happy to round out my team with him there.
Yeah, I mean, Shane Lowry's ball striking has certainly turned a corner in March. I mean, when March came, he's the last 2 tournaments he's played, and he's been absolutely crushing the ball. So seeing that old Shane Lowry form the way he's playing well right now, Shane Lowry is another guy that I feel like when playing well tends to rise to the occasion where he plays up in some of these better tournaments. So I am endorsing that pick for sure. Spence, will you be playing Lowry at all this week?
He is, I mean, we want to talk about betting markets. He is a favorite against pretty much every single person that is close to him. I think Sam Burns would be the one where it's a coin flip of which way it is. There is a sharp book out there that has Shane Lowry -170 over Wyndham Clark. Wow. that is a wild number. I'm not saying it's correct or it's wrong necessarily, but it's at least something to make you scratch your head and consider.
For sure. That's interesting. Food for thought for sure. All right. I'm going to round out my squad here. Listen, my instincts are telling me this is a bad pick, but everything on paper tells me that you should take him, and I'm going to go with the paper and not my instincts. He's going to be chalky, but chalky down here in the 6K range is still 10% or lower. So I think I'm okay with his, I'm seeing 9% right now, and that's Andrew Novak. Andrew Novak has been playing spectacular golf, and in his last 3 tournaments, he has 3 top 10s. I got a guy in his last 3 outings that has 3 top 10s at under 6,500. That's a new one. Now, obviously, the fields weren't quite as strong as this one, but the ball striking has been spectacular. And the big wild card with Novak is in those last 3 tournaments, he lost 3 strokes putting and won, but in the Phoenix Open and at the Cognizant, he had gained over 2 strokes putting. He is not typically or historically known to be a good putter. If he has found some consistency with that putter and continues to strike the ball the way he has, this is a for sure underpriced, and he should be able to compete with those numbers. So I'm buying into he's found something with the putter. The ball striking will be there at this price. He is certainly underpriced. So I'm going to go ahead and eat that chalk to round out my squad here. Audience, you are on the clock with your last pick. You got one left. You got $9K to spend. Plenty of money on the table to get that last one in. Looks like one nomination is in. We need it doubled. While we wait, we'll go back to you, Spence. Any interest in Andrew Novak this week?
I think he's probably too cheap for the price tag. I would say you're correct there. I do believe, and Aaron Rye is going to be popular also. Like those are going to be the two names that garner most of the ownership. I think there are ways to get unique and contrarian around them, depending on where you find yourself in a build. My model, like Maverick McNeely, one of the biggest underachievers for me in my model was Ben Griffin. I think Ben Griffin is a savvy name to consider down there at $6,000. But I think when you look specifically at your build, Joel, you were able to get different with Oberg in there, and I don't think Novak has quite the ownership that makes him unplayable. I actually have him lower than you do in projected ownership right now. We'll see where this ends up going, but I had him more at about 7% right now.
Right, it's at 7%. At this range, it's 7% high for 6,400.
It's very high for that, but
for the overall scheme of things, I'd rather go with the chalky 6,400 at 7% than some of these guys that are higher up that end up being in the 20s. So I'm okay with that. Audience, we still need that last pick to be doubled. So we'll wait on that. But while we wait, David, any interest in Andrew Novak this week?
It's probably a no for me on Andrew Novak. I hold some concerns, I guess, with his correlated course form or lack thereof. I mean, look, he's been in form. You're right. I mean, he's finished 8th, 9th his last 3 starts, and the putter looks good. Gain strokes putting on like similar greens at the Cognizant Classic, obviously still in Florida as well. I just worry a little bit about the mix of like driving accuracy and overall lack of putting ability. So look, he might surprise me. I guess other options that I probably prefer in that space, like Andrew Putnam last week was really good. 8th place finish, really good on approach. Probably a better putter overall than Andrew Novak, and he seems to be a little less owned. Although you wouldn't have been able to do this because the picks had already gone, like Brendan Todd and Aaron Rye within that range rank a bit higher. And I reckon that 6,200 Ryan Fox is interesting as well, rounding into a little bit of form, and he's a bit hidden and extremely low owned at just 2%. Would have been an interesting way, I think, to round out your lineup, because I think he possesses a little bit more higher upside than, say, Andrew Novak.
Where I definitely agree with you, I think there are a lot of playable options in this mid to low 6K range. What I find interesting about tonight's draft is that none of us ended up, and let me just double check. Yeah, none of us ended up dipping into the 5K range. So I think that's interesting. I think that is a sign. And like I say every week, and I will reiterate again this week, you should absolutely build your player pool first, then make your lineups. Do not allow yourself to make a lineup that you like 5 guys and just pick some guy in the 5K range because that's all you have left, and that one last guy is going to burn your entire lineup. Make sure you only play guys that are within your player pool, and if that means you have to change out a higher price guy to make sure you only have guys that you want to play to begin with, then that's what you do, because that one guy at the end of your lineup is going to be the one that burns you at the end, and you will regret it. Audience, great job getting that last pick in. JT Poston, rounding out your squad. Nicely done. That is a wrap for the draft tonight. Excellent time drafting with you all. I think it's a really exciting week ahead. Before we move on, do us a favor, hit the like button. Give us a follow. It goes a long way. Of course, as we do every week, we'll be coming back next week. We'll be crowning a champion for this week's draft, and we will be bragging about who had the best draft. So we'll post these lineups on Twitter. Give us your vote. Who do you think right now is going to come out victorious heading in to this tournament? Which lineup do you think is going to win? We will crown the winner and have bragging rights next Tuesday. We're not done yet. Before we head out for tonight, we do have some first round leader plays to run by you. We will start with you, David, tonight. Who are you looking at in the first round leader market?
First off, I'm really surprised the amount of money that the audience left on the table. They left $1,300 on the table there, which I think is a record for the most they've left. So definitely a really intriguing way to round out the lineup for them there and leave so much money on the table. Certainly going to be very, very different. In terms of first round leaders, I want to take a punt on some guys that I don't necessarily like in the week-long tournament markets, but have the chance to, I guess, spike and come out there with one round, which is what the first round leader is all about. I'm certainly seeing the morning has been a lot calmer, higher winds in the afternoon, so you can really like hone in your first round leader pool to those morning tee times and hopefully find some decent values. So We talked about Russell Henley on the show. I like him at 55-1 for the first round leader. I trust him a little bit more to come out firing in that first round on a course that should really suit, a little more so than his ability to actually finish the event. Tom Kim, I think, is very interesting at 70-1. Again, we can see him spike with one very, very hot round. I think that's a great number for him there. Aaron Rai, likewise, at 80-1. Billy Ho, we've mentioned pretty extensively on the show. Shout out to Zach, who was giving me a hard time for mentioning him, and Silent Assassin as well for the fact I referenced them stealing the pick 3 times, which is now 4 times. You guys still stole Billy Horschel from me, and I'll never forgive you. And then Christian Bezadenhout, 100-1. As I said, in that 2020 Players' Championship, that wasn't. In the first round, Bezadenhout actually had a 7 under behind just Matsuyama. So really sneaky there in terms of the fact that he's had that pop round, gets a morning tea time, and 100 on is a great number for him for the first round leader.
I love it. I love it. All right, Spence, how about you? Who are you looking at in the first round leader market?
I'm going to double down on a lot of what David just talked about. I have 55-1 on Russell Henley. I have 55-1 on Siwoo Kim. And then the Aaron Rai play at 80-1. There was one thing that my model picked up. So I ran hole by hole data for it, and there were a couple golfers that were above him in this area. But when I simulated the results for it, Aaron Rai had 7 holes where essentially projected him to be a top 25 scorer in this field. He didn't have anything that landed outside of the top 100 in that area with it. I think he has the potential for one day to get very, very hot. You kind of see that with just some of the course breakdown with the simulation that I ran for it. So I think at 80-1, he's a very interesting play to consider.
I love it. I love it. I'm coming to you guys this week with a couple home run plays. We're going to go deep down the board, a couple 150-1, maybe that far down. I'm going to start with Justin Lower at 150-1. Obviously, this is not a high confidence play, but it's a 150-1 play. I think he actually has a chance to be a first runner. He's been striking the ball really well. He can make some putts. At a volatile course like this, I think he can, one day blow up and fall out of contention. But I think he can put together one really solid day for a 151 shot to take. I also like Carson Young at 130-1, for whom is a similar profile. He's a guy who can strike the ball well, obviously has some other flaws. Not someone I'm even targeting for week long, but I think for one day, it's someone you want to reach for a long shot that could be a first round leader play. I think those two guys have some viability if you're looking for long shots. In terms of more reasonable, realistic plays that I like, I'm going to go with my draft pick, Ludwig Aubert. I think he could be a first round leader and get a hot day early on at 45-1. And my last play that hasn't been mentioned on the show at all, I'll throw out there. He's not in great form, but he does tend to pop, especially in round ones at tournaments like this. It's Tommy Fleetwood at 50-1. That's a wrap on the first round leader side. Don't forget, Steven will be releasing his ownership article tomorrow. It is one of the best ownership articles you'll find. It is going to be critical this week in understanding how to play DFS and understanding where you want to make your targets and how to get different. So keep a lookout for that. Also, get into Discord. If you're not a member, sign up now. Get into Win Daily within Discord before the tournament starts. We'll have weather updates. If there's a weather edge, you'll see that there. You'll see more outright plays from the team if you want to make them. And any other updates that you might be able to find. So follow along, get in, cash and punch some winning tickets with us this week. And, of course, follow along on Twitter as we post these lineups. Put your votes in who you think is going to win. We are crowning a winner next week. Am I forgetting anything else?
I will say, I saw people talking earlier in the show about this black and pink combination that I have going on. I am very proud of this. Skins on the hat, Shawn Michaels on the shirt. Very classy there, if I do say so myself.
Some would say the Heartbreak Kid.
Some would.
Listen, not only is it class, that's how you show up for an elevated event, right? You don't go to WrestleMania in your traditional gear. You go to the elevated event wearing elevated gear. And obviously Spencer is showing us the way. So thank you, Spencer.
You come in with the Big Papa song, Shawn Michaels gear. I mean, we do things at a higher level than most people out there. So there's a lot that goes into this beyond just the picks.
I love it. Of course, as always, audience, you make this show. We couldn't do this without you guys. You are what makes this work. So any suggestions, anything else you guys are looking for from us, throw it in the chat. We'll do our best to be able to accommodate everyone's requests. I think that's actually it for tonight, right? In case, unless I forgot.
Sports.
Of course.